Here's 5 defenses you should stash before the weekend and the games start on Sunday before you got to waste a waiver next week. The first team's the LA Chargers. Chargers this week, they versus the Miami Dolphins, and the Dolphins, I think, might give them trouble. The Chargers versus pretty decent offenses. They don't get the job done on defense or win the ball games. So I'm stashing this defense because of the opponent next week. And they got a dream matchup versus the New York Jets, who give up the first most fantasy points to defenses. So the Chargers next week, that's the stash. You get them in there next week, you start them, and they'll have a good game. But this week versus Miami, I just don't recommend it. Miami gives up the 7th least fantasy points to defenses, and I just don't like the matchup going down there. I think that game's going to be a shootout. So this pickup of the Charger D, like I said, is for next week. The second defense is the Washington football team, a team I said I was going to start in my top 5 defenses to start this week. And Washington was in that video. Go check it out. And Washington's football team's defense now, they've been dropped in 41% of leagues, and now they're only 66. They're 66% available in all fantasy leagues. And they've been playing well of late. Last week they had 7 points versus the Giants. This week they're versus Detroit. If Stafford don't play because of the concussion, they're a start. But they're also more of a start for weeks 11 and 12 with 2 good games versus Cincinnati and Dallas coming back up for this Washington football team. So their defense, I like them the next 2 weeks, not so much this week. And that's why if you got room on your bench to stash them, this is the time to go do it before you got to waste a waiver or whatever, or not get them going into next week. And the third and final defense I'm looking to stash before the games this Sunday is the Denver Broncos. This week I wouldn't use the Broncos versus Las Vegas, which I think it's going to be a shootout as well. But the Broncos, they got Miami next week in Denver, and that's the game I'm circling to have the Broncos defense for, because the Broncos, no Von Miller, they haven't been good all season. The last few weeks, in Week 7 versus the Chiefs, only 2 fantasy points. In Week 8, only 7. And then in Week 9 last week in Atlanta, only 3. Now they got Vegas. I don't see him doing much. Only 5 to 7 points. But Miami is the game I like them versus in Week 11, and that's why I would stash them. So that's 3 defenses I'm looking to stash before the games start heading into Week 10.